65 million years ago, the most dangerous land predator that has ever lived went extinct. Tyrannosaurus rex, 40 feet long, 12 feet tall, up to 9 tons, a bite force that could crush a car, a sense of smell that could detect prey from 4 miles away, and eyesight sharper than an eagle's. For 65 million years, nothing on Earth has had to think about what it would be like to encounter one. Then, at 6:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, a fully grown adult Tyrannosaurus rex appears in Central Park. Not a recreation, not a hologram. 11,000 pounds of muscle, bone, and 65-million-year-old instinct standing in the Sheep Meadow in the middle of Manhattan at the start of rush hour. Nobody knows how. Nobody knows why. What everyone is about to find out in the next 12 hours is what happens when the most efficient killing machine evolution ever produced meets the most densely populated 4 square miles in North America. The T-Rex doesn't know it's in New York. It doesn't know what New York is. It knows 3 things. There is a vast amount of unfamiliar movement around it. That movement smells like food, and it is hungry. The first 911 calls come in at 6:17 a.m. from joggers on the Central Park Reservoir Loop. 3 minutes after a Parks Department maintenance worker, the first human being to see a living Tyrannosaurus rex in 65 million years, drops his coffee at the edge of the Sheep Meadow and runs. The 911 dispatcher's training has prepared her for almost everything a New York morning can produce. It has not prepared her for a caller saying, calmly, in the specific tone of someone who knows how insane they sound and has decided to push through it anyway, "There's a dinosaur in the park." By 6:22 a.m., NAIPD has 14 separate calls describing the same thing from different vantage points around the park's southern end. The responding officers, 2 patrol cars from the Central Park Precinct, the smallest precinct in the city, responsible for policing 843 acres of green space in the middle of Manhattan, arrive at the Sheep Meadow at 6:26 a.m. What they see, in the gray pre-dawn light, standing among the joggers' abandoned water bottles and a toppled food cart, is 40 feet of animal that should not exist, turning its head toward the sound of their sirens with the calm, predatory attentiveness of something that has just located the source of an interesting new noise. The watch commander at the Central Park Precinct makes the first decision of the crisis, and it is, in retrospect, the single most important decision of the entire event. He does not approach. He does not attempt to use the patrol car's PA system to clear the area, which is standard procedure for crowd incidents, and which would have meant driving closer. He gets on the radio and says 4 words that trigger New York City's largest emergency mobilization since September 11th. "I need everyone. Now." The reason this decision matters becomes clear within minutes. T-Rex's sense of smell can detect prey from up to 4 miles away, and its hearing and vision, comparable to a bird of prey, mean that anything that moves quickly, makes noise, or approaches directly registers as either prey or threat. The watch commander, without any briefing on dinosaur behavior, instinctively does the one thing that gives the city its only chance in the first hour. He treats the animal exactly the way you would treat an apex predator that has wandered into a populated area, because that is precisely what it is. Don't approach, don't run close by, get everyone away from it slowly, without triggering a chase response. The NYPD's emergency notification system, wireless emergency alerts, pushes to every phone in Manhattan at 6:34 a.m. The message is 4 words longer than the watch commander's radio call, but says the same thing. Avoid Central Park. Large animal. Do not approach. The fundamental problem facing every agency responding to this event becomes clear within 30 minutes, and it is not the teacher itself. It is Manhattan. Central Park is surrounded on all 4 sides by some of the densest urban development on Earth. 5th Avenue to the east, Central Park west to the west, 59th Street to the south, 110th Street to the north. Inside that perimeter, 843 acres of paths, meadows, woodlands, a reservoir, and a zoo. Outside that perimeter, within a half-mile radius, roughly 400,000 people beginning their Tuesday commute. The NYPD's options for dealing with a dangerous animal are built around suburban and rural scenarios: tranquilizer darts, containment perimeters, controlled relocation. None of those options were designed for a 9-ton animal in the middle of the most populous borough in America at 6:45 a.m. on a weekday. The Department of Environmental Protection's Wildlife Unit, normally tasked with coyotes, the occasional escaped pet, geese on the runways at LaGuardia, has exactly zero protocols for an animal of this size. The first call made by the Office of Emergency Management at 6:41 a.m. is not to a zoo or a wildlife agency or even the military. It's to the American Museum of Natural History, 6 blocks away, home to one of the most famous T-Rex skeletons in the world. The question the OEM director asks the museum's head paleontologist, reached at home, getting his kids ready for school, is the strangest question any paleontologist has ever been asked by a government official. If this thing is real and it's hungry, what does it do next? The paleontologist, Dr. Elena Vasquez, who has spent 22 years studying T-Rex biomechanics and has reconstructed more T-Rex movement patterns than almost anyone alive, arrives at the Office of Emergency Management's command post, hastily established at the tavern on the green a quarter mile from the Sheep Meadow, at 7 a.m. She has 6 minutes with the OEM director before the first major decision needs to be made. What she tells him reshapes the entire response. T-Rex, she explains, was not built for speed over distance. Its walking pace is roughly 3 to 5 miles per hour, comparable to a human walk, with burst speeds estimated as high as 25 to 35 miles per hour over very short distances when pursuing prey. It is not a sprinter chasing things across open plains. It is an ambush and pursuit predator that conserves energy and responds to triggers. Movement, sound, smell within its immediate environment. The director asks the only question that matters. If nothing moves, what does it do, doctor? Vasquez says, based on everything we know about predator behavior in unfamiliar environments, it investigates. Slowly, it's disoriented. It just arrived somewhere with no other tyrannosaurs, no plant life it recognizes, and thousands of unfamiliar scent and sound sources. Its instinct right now isn't to hunt efficiently. It's to figure out what kind of place this is. The director says, how long does that take, doctor? Vasquez says, I have no idea. Nobody has ever asked that question before. The evacuation order for the area immediately surrounding Central Park, roughly from 57th Street to 96th Street, river to river, goes out at 7:15 a.m., 45 minutes before the height of rush hour. The logistics of this are almost incomprehensible. The Upper East Side and Upper West Side combined are home to over 600,000 people. Subway lines that run beneath and adjacent to the park, the 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, and D, are halted from servicing stations within the evacuation zone, stranding tens of thousands of commuters mid-transit. The decision that the OEM director makes on Dr. Vasquez's advice is the one that defines the entire morning. People are not told to run. They're told to move calmly, away from the park using interior routes, through buildings, down side streets, rather than major avenues with direct sight lines into the park. The reasoning is the same reasoning a park ranger gives hikers in bear country. Don't sprint, don't scream, don't draw attention. 600,000 New Yorkers, the most famously unflappable population in America, are asked at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday to walk calmly away from a Tyrannosaurus Rex. By 7:40 a.m., footage from a resident's apartment window on Central Park West, quiet streets, people walking briskly but not running, many filming on their phones even as they walk, becomes the first viral video of the crisis. The caption, posted by the resident, reads simply, New York is not surprised enough by this, and that scares me more than the dinosaur. At 8:02 a.m., the T-Rex moves for the first time since the initial sighting, and it moves toward the sound of a NIPD helicopter that has been circling at what the pilot believed was a safe altitude of 500 feet. The animal's behavior, observed by Dr. Vasquez and a team of paleontologists now monitoring from the safety of the Metropolitan Museum's roof, is exactly what she predicted. Investigation, not aggression. It raises its head, tracks the helicopter's movement with the kind of binocular focus a hawk uses on a moving target, and takes several steps toward the sound. Not a charge, a walk, but a walk that covers ground at roughly 4 miles per hour and crosses the width of the Sheep Meadow in under 90 seconds. The helicopter pilot, watching 11 zoos and pounds of animal walk toward his position with what looks like simple curiosity, but might be the early stage of a predatory fixation, makes the only reasonable decision. He climbs and moves off immediately. The T-Rex stops at the tree line, watches the helicopter recede, and, in the moment that every paleontologist watching will describe afterward as the most important behavioral data point of the entire event, turns its attention to something closer. A maintenance vehicle, abandoned with its engine still running near the Sheep Meadow's edge. The animal approaches it, sniffs it. The engine noise and exhaust heat register as something, not food, not a threat it recognizes, but something worth investigating. It does not attack the vehicle. It stands over it for nearly 4 minutes, motionless except for its head, processing. Dr. Vasquez, watching the feed, says quietly, "It's learning what this place sounds like." The New York National Guard's 42nd Infantry Division begins arriving at staging points around the park perimeter at 9 a.m. Roughly 800 soldiers in the first wave, with armored vehicles establishing positions at the park's transverse roads, the points where city streets cut through Central Park and represent the most likely paths for the animal to leave the park's green space and enter the street grid. The Guard's rules of engagement, hammered out in a tense 20-minute conference call between the governor's office, the Pentagon, and Dr. Vasquez's team, prioritize one thing above all else: containment without provocation. Lethal force is authorized only if the animal exits the park boundary and poses immediate danger to human life, and even then, the weapons identified as potentially effective, low 50 caliber machine guns, Javelin anti-tank missiles mounted on a small number of Humvees, are positioned as an absolute last resort, because nobody, not the Guard, not Dr. Vasquez, not anyone in the chain of command, can answer the question of what 11,000 pounds of wounded, enraged apex predator does in a city block full of buildings, cars, and people who didn't evacuate in time. The plan, such as it is the same plan you'd use for a grizzly bear that wandered into a small town, scaled up by a factor that makes every existing protocol obsolete. Hold the perimeter, keep it calm, keep it in the park, and wait. At 10 a.m., the crisis takes its first genuinely dangerous turn, and it has nothing to do with anything the National Guard, the NIPED, or Dr. Vasquez's team did. It's the bakeries. The Upper East Side and Upper West Side, evacuated as they are, still have hundreds of restaurants, delis, and bakeries that were mid-prep for the breakfast rush when the evacuation order came through. Ovens left on, food left out. In some cases, doors left open in the rush to leave. T-Rex's sense of smell, capable of detecting carrion from miles away, is now operating in an environment saturated with the smell of cooking meat, bread, and food waste drifting from hundreds of unattended kitchens on the streets bordering the park. At 10:11 a.m., the animal, which has spent the last 2 hours moving in slow, investigative loops around the Sheep Meadow and the nearby Sheep Meadow restrooms, turns and walks, with noticeably increased purpose, toward Columbus Circle at the park's southwest corner, where 3 restaurants left their kitchen exhaust fans running. Dr. Vasquez, watching the animal's gait change from investigative wandering to directed movement for the first time, says into the command post radio with as much calm as she can manage, "It's not curious anymore. It smells breakfast." The closest call of the entire crisis happens at 10:20 a.m. at the corner of Central Park South and Columbus Circle, and it involves not the National Guard, not the NIPD, but a single livestock, specifically, the horses of the Central Park horse-drawn carriage operators, several of which were stabled in their daytime holding area near Columbus Circle and had not been part of the morning's evacuation planning, because nobody, in the entire history of emergency planning for Manhattan, had ever considered that the carriage horses would need their own evacuation protocol. The T-Rex, moving toward the smell of the restaurant kitchens, passes within 200 feet of 11 horses in a holding pen, and the horses' reaction is immediate, visceral, and entirely unplanned for. Pure terror, the kind of reaction that 65 million years of evolutionary memory apparently still carries even in a domesticated animal that has never seen a black predator larger than a German shepherd. The screaming of 11 panicked horses is, according to every account from the scene, louder than anything else that has happened all morning, and it is this sound, not the smell of bakeries, that the T-Rex responds to first. It turns toward the horses, It takes 3 steps in their direction, and then, in the single moment that Dr. Vasquez later describes as the only piece of pure luck in the entire event, an NYPD aviation unit helicopter, returning to check on the situation, passes low overhead at exactly that moment, and the T-Rex's attention snaps upward, toward the now familiar sound of rotors away from the horses, just long enough for the carriage operators, who never evacuated, because they were trying to save their horses to get the gate open and the animals running south down Central Park South, away from the park, toward the relative safety of the evacuated streets. By 11:00 a.m., 5 hours into the crisis, Dr. Vasquez's team has assembled enough behavioral data to brief the OEM director with something resembling a coherent picture, and it's the first genuinely useful piece of information the response has had all morning. The T-Rex, she explains, is not hunting in any organized sense, and it's not random either. It is responding moment to moment to the most intense and most novel stimulus in its immediate environment. And in a city of 8.4 million people's worth of abandoned stimuli, that means its behavior over the last 5 hours has been a chain reaction. Helicopter, then engine noise, then food smell, then panicking horses, then helicopter again. Each new stimulus interrupts whatever it was doing and redirects its attention. The director asks, so it's distractible? Dr. Vasquez says, it's the most distractible apex predator that has ever existed, because nothing in its evolutionary history prepared it for an environment with this much going on. In the Cretaceous, the most stimulus a T-Rex would encounter in an hour might be 1 or 2 other animals and some weather. It's getting more novel input in 5 hours than it would have gotten in 5 years. The director says, can we use that? Dr. Vasquez looks at the map of the park, at the helicopter positions, at the guards' perimeter vehicles, and says, I think we might be able to walk it back to where it came from, one distraction at a time. What happens over the next 3 hours has no precedent in the history of emergency response and will be studied by wildlife management agencies. For decades, Dr. Vasquez's team, working with the NYPD aviation unit and the National Guard, begins a coordinated effort to herd. There is no better word for it. An 11,000-pound Tyrannosaurus rex back toward the Sheep Meadow, the open ground where it first appeared, using nothing but controlled, sequential distractions. A helicopter holds position to the north, just close enough to keep the animal's attention oriented away from the park's northern exits. Generators are deliberately run near the Sheep Meadow's edge, engine noise being the one stimulus that has reliably drawn the animal's attention all day, creating, in effect, the most expensive and strangest piece of bait in human history. Food is not used. Dr. Vasquez vetoes this immediately, on the grounds that an apex predator that learns this environment provides food on demand is an apex predator that never leaves. Instead, the team uses what they have, noise, movement, and the topography of the park itself, gently funneling the animal's investigative wandering back toward open ground using the same principles wildlife officers use to move a bear away from a campground. Not force, not aggression, just making every direction except the desired one slightly less interesting. By 2:40 p.m., after nearly 3 hours of the most surreal logistics operation in city history, the T-Rex is back in the Sheep Meadow, tired, based on its slower movements and increased resting periods, in an environment that has, for the last 8 hours, thrown more novelty at it than its entire species encountered in 3 million years of existence. At 3:14 p.m., exactly 9 hours after the first 911 call, the Tyrannosaurus rex lies down in the Sheep Meadow, the same patch of grass where it first appeared, and does not get up. Dr. Vasquez's team, observing from a distance with thermal cameras, confirms what the behavior suggests. The animal is resting, not distressed, not injured, just exhausted in the way any animal would be after 9 hours of unrelenting sensory overload in an environment with no rest, no familiar food, and no others of its kind. The crisis isn't over. Nobody knows what happens when it wakes up, whether it will repeat the morning's pattern, whether tomorrow's sunrise will bring a second wave of chaos, or whether, as Dr. Vasquez raises in the evening briefing, almost as an afterthought, because nobody has had time to think about it until now, the most important question of the entire day. Not how do we manage this animal, but how did it get here, and is it the only one? The OEM director briefing the mayor at 9 p.m. with the animal asleep in Central Park. New York's economy losing an estimated $1.8 billion for the day, and the National Guard settling in for what is now officially an overnight containment operation, says the only thing anyone in city government has said all day that sums up the entire experience. We survived the most dangerous predator in the history of the planet by being the most boring thing it had ever seen by 3 p.m. I genuinely don't know if we should be proud of that or terrified by it. What the events in Central Park revealed, what every paleontologist, every emergency manager, and eventually every viewer of the footage from that day understood by nightfall, is something that reframes the entire premise of what if a dinosaur appeared in a modern city. The danger was never the T-Rex's strength or its speed or its size. Even though all three of those things made it capable of killing anyone it focused on in seconds, the danger was the city itself. 8 million strangers, hundreds of thousands of vehicles, food smells, sirens, helicopters, panicking animals, and an infrastructure built with absolutely zero consideration for what happens when something that hasn't existed for 65 million years needs to be, gently, carefully persuaded to take a nap. Rex was the apex predator of its world for 3 million years. It never had to be smart, because nothing in its world was more interesting than it was. New York didn't defeat a Tyrannosaurus Rex with weapons or walls or tranquilizers. It defeated it by being so relentlessly, overwhelmingly, chaotically itself that the most dangerous animal in the history of the planet got tired before it got hungry enough to matter. Subscribe, because tomorrow morning the sun is going to come up over Central Park, and nobody knows what happens when it does.